I think our first ethical priority is to stop doing harm, and right now in our factory farms billions of non-human animals are being treated in ways that, if our victims were human, would get the perpetrators locked up for life. And the sentience, and for what it's worth the sapience of a pig, compares with the pre-linguistic toddler. A chicken perhaps may be no more intellectually advanced or sentient than a human infant. But before considering the suffering of free living animals, we need to consider, I think, the suffering we're causing our fellow creatures. Essentially, it's a lifestyle choice. Do we want to continue to exploit and abuse other sentient beings because we like the taste of their flesh, or do we want to embrace a cruelty-free vegan lifestyle? Some people would focus on treating other sentient beings less inhumanely. I'd say that we really need an ethical revolution in which our focus is how can we help other sentient beings rather than harm them. It's very straightforward indeed to be a vegetarian. Vegetarians tend to, statistically, they live longer, they record higher IQ scores, they tend to be slimmer. It's very easy to be a vegetarian. A strict vegan lifestyle requires considerably more effort, but over the medium to long run, I think our focus should be going vegan. In the short run, I think we should be closing factory farms and slaughterhouses. And given that factory farming and slaughterhouses are the greatest source of severe, chronic and readily avoidable suffering in the world today, any talk of intervening compassionate stewardship of the rest of the living world is fanciful. Will ethical argument alone persuade us to stop exploiting and killing other human beings because we like the taste of their flesh? Possibly not. I think realistically one wants a twin-track strategy that combines animal advocacy with the development of in vitro meat. But I would strenuously urge anyone watching this program to consider giving up meat and animal products if you are ethically serious. The final strand of the abolitionist project on Earth, however, is free living animals in nature. And it might seem ecologically illiterate to argue that it is going to be feasible to take care of elephants, zebras, free living animals, because after all, let's say there is let's say starvation, it's in winter. If you start feeding a lot of starving herbivores, all this does, it will lead the next spring to a population explosion followed by ecological collapse, more suffering than before. However, what is potentially feasible, if we're ethically serious, is to micromanage the entire living world. Now this sounds extremely far-fetched and utopian, but I'll sketch how it is feasible. Later this century and beyond, every cubic meter of the planet is going to be computationally accessible to surveillance, micromanagement and control. And if we want to, we can use fertility regulation, immunocontraception to regulate population numbers, cross-species fertility control, starting off presumably with higher vertebrates, elephants for instance, already now in the Kruger National Park, for example, in preference to the cruel practice of culling, population numbers are controlled by immunocontraception. So starting off with higher vertebrates, but eventually in our wildlife parks across the phylogenetic tree it will be possible to micromanage the living world. And just as right now, if you were to stumble across a small child who is drowning in a pond, you would be guilty of complicity in that child's drowning if you didn't pull the child out. Exactly the same intimacy over the rest of the living world is going to be feasible later this century and beyond. Now, what about obligate carnivores, predators? Surely it's inevitable that they're going to continue to prey on herbivores, so that means one might intuitively suppose that the abolitionist project could never be completed. But even there, if we're ethically serious, there are workarounds. In vitro meat, for instance, big cats, if they are offered in vitro meat, catnip flavoured in vitro meat, they're not going to be tempted to chase after herbivores. Alternatively, a little bit of genetic tweaking and you no longer have an obligate carnivore. I'm supposing here that we do want to preserve recognisable approximations of today's so-called charismatic megafauna. Many people are extremely unhappy at the idea that lions or tigers or snakes or crocodiles should go extinct. I'm not personally persuaded that the world would be a worse place without crocodiles or snakes, but if we do want to preserve them, it's possible genetically to treat them or provide in vitro meat so that they don't actually do any harm to sentient beings. Some species essentialists would respond that a lion that is no longer chasing, asphyxiating, disemboweling zebras is no longer truly a lion. But one might make the same argument that a Homo sapiens who is no longer beating his rivals over a head or waging war or practicing infanticide, slavery and all the other ghastly practices of our evolutionary past, or for that matter wearing clothes, that someone who adopts a more civilized lifestyle, they're no longer truly human. To which I can only say, good. And likewise, if there is a living world in which lions are pacific, if a lion, so to speak, is lying down with the lamb, I would say that is much more civilized.